Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? Are you ready? Get ready, dog. Get ready.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Rocket Networker podcast. I always like to begin with a silly networking story. For nearly 40 years, I've intentionally spent time connecting with University of Toledo alumni around the world. Each year, my family and I attend homecoming to walk the campus, host small events, and tailgate parties. Over the years, we've met too many great people to count from around the world. Their stories and success always amaze me. And that's where today's Rocket Networker guest comes in, Bill Yosses. Bill is a lifelong executive chef. He's owned a number of food establishments in New York City, and he has a deep passion for regenerative agriculture and our food supply. Bill also served as executive pastry chef at the White House under Presidents Bush and Obama. Bill, thanks for making time in your busy schedule to join us on the Rocket Networker podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I love the threads of connectivity that you are advocating, and hope I can be part of it.
It's our honor to have you on. We're going to have a lot of fun today talking about your life journey, and we'll probably sneak into a little pastry chef dialogue about the White House. But here's my first question. How are things in New York City?
Hot. Yeah, it actually today's the first day it went down a little bit. I think we usually get your used up weather, like in Ohio, it heads over this way. So after you get done with it, you throw it over our way, and so it's cooled down a little bit. Otherwise, things look. New York is it has a lot of great things going for it, a lot of not so great things. We just try to help where we can and stay focused on our own health and wellness.
Bill, as background on the podcast, what we like to focus on is a concept you mentioned it a minute ago called the threads of connectivity. In simple terms, these threads are little things like our hometown, our family, our high school, our college, our involvement in student organizations in high school and college, and all the moments through our career where we've lived and the work we've done and the people we've met and the volunteerism that we all do. Those are the little things that connect us at a human level, as an individual level, that build trust in relationships. And as you know, Bill, from your career, people in the business community, they always want to focus on business. But the reality of relationships is they don't come from business. They come from our life experience. So that's the concept behind the Rocket Networker. So what I'd like to do is take us on a journey back in time and go to your hometown. Where are you from?
I'm from Toledo. Grew up.
Okay.
I didn't leave Toledo until I was in my early 20s. It was in South Toledo near Vernon Heatherdown's, which at the time, show you how old I am, there was actually still a goat farm on that corner when my parents bought a house in the neighborhood. And the owners had a girl my age, and we went to school together. But I can still remember going over there and playing with the goats.
Talk a little. Where'd you go to grade school? Where'd you go? Grade school, high school?
I went to St. Patrick's of Heatherdown's on just down the road there. 8 years there, and still have friends and in touch with kids I went to school with. And I went to high school at Bowsher. It was in its old location on South Detroit. And and then I went to college at the University of Toledo.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have an older brother and a younger sister. My brother was very involved in Toledo activities. He was the city law director for many years and a booster of University of Toledo, where he went to law school.
Okay.
And so I have fond memories of my time in that great city.
So let's talk a little bit about high school. When you attended Bowsher, were you involved in any student organizations or clubs?
Yeah, I was pretty active socially. I would say I belonged to a social group called the Forum. I was on the student council all 4 years that I was there. Um, uh, I'm trying to think if there was. I was not part of the theater group, the drama group, but all my friends were, and so
Okay.
I feel like I was sort of a an honorary member because they were all in the musicals and theater that was put on at the school, which is a very fond memory as well.
Do you have any specific fond memories that you've carried your whole life with you that
I
take you
do.
back to Bowser's?
Sure do. Mainly it was my friends, but also the teachers. There was very devoted teachers. I think all of us can remember, that one or two people that really supported us, listened to us as adults, not as prattling babies.
Right.
And so one man, he just passed away a couple years ago. His name was Gordon Meeks. He was the history teacher, and his class, we always look forward to it. He because he would ask us questions and really listen to our thoughts and take them seriously and engage in a kind of sometimes a discussion or argument. Sometimes he
Right.
agreed with it. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, Gordon was Mr. Meeks. I still not comfortable calling him Gordon. Mr. Meeks.
Isn't that funny? How even like our friends' parents, at age 60, I
That's right.
still refer to my friends' parents as Mr. and Mrs.
Likewise, likewise.
That's I guess that respect was ingrained into us here in
That's right.
Northwest Ohio. It sounds like you had a great experience at Bowser. So when you were getting toward senior year and thinking about life after high school, what were you thinking about? Were you thinking military or skilled trade, or were you thinking about college?
Yeah, I was thinking about college. My father was the first in his family to have gone to college, and my mother had only gone for 2 years, and she always regretted it. So they were really adamant that all the kids should go to college and that we should pay for it ourselves. There was, I,
I get that.
that was like, we insist you go, and by the way, you're paying for
You're paying for it. Good luck with that.
it. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think it gave me a lot of confidence in my ability to make it in the world. Um, and so I did. I worked throughout the college years, except the last 6 months. I had saved enough money that I could concentrate on really getting my studies done. And so out of high school, I went right into college. And and the other thing that I appreciate about my parents is they didn't like insist we follow a certain path. My father was in business, and he was like, "You choose, you do what you want, you do what you love." So what I loved was French language and Latin,
Okay. All right.
and they must have. I'm sure they rolled their eyes when they thought, like, "What is this kid going to do with those two talents?" But in fact, it worked out all right, and that's what I majored in, languages. That's what I
Okay.
was good at, and I was not particularly good at anything else.
Okay. I got it.
So yeah, that's what I did at University of Toledo.
That's neat. Now, were you involved in any student groups, or were you mostly school and then working to pay for school?
Yeah, working the latter, school and working to pay for school. I was not really didn't have time. I was a serious student. I was in the library many hours. Um, I wanted to be sure that I maintained a good GPA, and so no, unfortunately, I made many friends. Just in the population, in the student population, but I wasn't formally involved in any groups there.
Okay, so in college, it sounds like you had good academic focus. As you start get toward the point of graduating from college, what were you thinking about there? What was you know what career path were you dreaming about when you went to graduate?
Um, yeah, actually I remember now. I applied to the Peace Corps, and
Okay,
I was accepted, um, and considered that. But I also applied to some graduate schools, and I was accepted at Rutgers and was given a scholarship and a stipend. So, and I think it was $3,000 a year. I thought I had hit the lottery. I thought
You
that
were gonna
is
s- you
so
were gonna
much
stay in
money.
college the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna. Why do I have to do work? I'll just do
Yeah.
this. Um, and yeah, $3,000 was a lot of money then.
So, what was your focus in graduate school?
So again, one thing I knew I was good at was languages, and so I got a master's degree in French language, um, and pursued that up to the master's. I decided to put off going for a PhD. I, I don't know. By that time I wanted to get out there and get how you are at that age. Like, this is
Right.
not real life.
Yeah,
I would do anything to go back to it now. It was
I
such
know,
a
right?
great time. But anyway, yeah, and then I joined the workforce. I started working for Air France, the French airline, who had
Okay.
they were just beginning service of the Concorde, the supersonic airliner, and so they needed people that spoke French, and I did, and that's where I worked for 6 years.
That's like a great lesson learned for folks that are in college and they're studying foreign languages is if you get good at reading, writing, and speaking that language, there are business opportunities that come out of that, not just
Yeah.
teaching
Yes.
opportunities, right? So it
That's,
sounds like you kind of found that path.
yeah, that's exactly right. I was excited to have a full time job, and I often say it's also a very difficult period. So for people who are watching this who are maybe still students or just graduating, um, in college, if you do well, everybody's always patting you on the back. Oh, that's a good term paper, Bill. But you really spoke well. And then you get in the workforce and they're like, you don't know anything, kid. You're dumb as hell. And so it's really a wake up call, but probably a good one, to get you to keep striving and keep learning. We're lifelong learners, as it should be.
That's good advice. So you said that you were there at Air France for about 6 years. Were you actually in Jersey or did you move to another location?
No, I moved into New York City at that time.
Okay.
Uh, I mean, the reason I say New York is so great now is compared to the way it was then.
That's
It
true.
was it
That's
was
very true.
really they were on the verge of bankruptcy, and it took a financial firm, Lazard Frères, to save the city from bankruptcy. But anyway, yeah, it's an exciting time of life. It's just the best when you have your first apartment and you can
Mhm.
actually pay for meals. Nothing fancy, but yeah, it's a great time of life.
So now you're in New York City, you're working at Air France, you're using your language.
Right.
Where does life take you from there? What's the next chapter?
Well, I mention this often. I was just reading this book about public speaking, and they say sometimes you have to learn who you are not before you learn who you are. And so we try different things in life, and it's important to recognize if it's not right for you. So that particular business was not right for me. Being in an office,
Right.
I wanted to be able to work with my hands, which was not particularly. I wouldn't say I grew up doing that. I didn't grow up cooking for sure, but I did have a sort of visual sense, a sort of sense of design, and sense of sort of art, if you will. And so then that's when I got into cooking, and also being exposed to so many French restaurants and French people who were cooking at home and doing so very well. Um, yeah, I really got the bug for cooking, and that's when I got into it.
So did you start working at that point then when you left Air France? Did you start working in French restaurants or did you
Uh,
have other things you were
I
doing?
I worked for free. I picked the best restaurant I could find, and I said, "I will work here every day. You don't have to pay me." And at that time, there was people were a little bit looser then about insurance and all that. They said, "Yeah, sure, come on in."
Right.
And now it's more organized, but we still do this. It's called internship, and most culinary schools have it. I also, after that, I went to culinary school in Brooklyn, a very
Okay.
good culinary school, part of CUNY, the City University of New York. There again, I have to laugh. Tuition was $600 a year. I sound like I'm from the Middle Ages or the
Yeah.
19th century or something,
Yeah.
but
So you're trying to suggest you didn't take the subway, you rode horseback
that's right.
down to
That's
take it
right.
from the city,
Yes,
right?
yes, and we communicated through cave paintings in those
Yeah.
days. That was the saber-toothed tiger was,
Yeah.
on the menu. Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, so I really threw myself into it. Went back to school. Now, this is my like second post-college schooling experience. It was a great experience. Again, very devoted teachers. I completed that, and then I found a job in France and moved to
Really? Okay.
France and worked there for several years.
Wow, that's exciting.
It was great.
What
Great.
was your favorite part of living and working in France?
The architecture. The architecture is something that. So I was, familiar with. There's beautiful American buildings, certainly, but living in Paris, you're just surrounded by so much history. So I would say history and architecture. You can just feel, how these streets must have been when there was, the Enlightenment or the French Revolution or the all these historical things that I had read about in school, and you would just look at some of these buildings and read the plaques on them, and they've been standing there for a long time. I mean, Notre Dame was started being built, I think, in 1200 or something like
Yeah,
that.
right. Think about it's crazy, right?
It's
It's still there.
crazy,
It's
and
amazing.
we yeah. So I think we respond to that as Americans, especially if we love history.
So now you're in France, you've got your culinary degree. I'm assuming that in France you were working as a chef.
Well, in the general public says chef for anybody in the kitchen. I was in the kitchen. We say chef as the person at the top. So the
Okay.
rest of us are cooks.
Okay.
Um,
So you're a cook.
yeah, I
Okay.
was a cook and learned a hell of a lot. It was a very traditional French style restaurant that I first worked in. And here I'm coming from Toledo. My mom was a good cook and a good dessert maker, but pretty much limited to the good housekeeping recipes of the day. And here
Right.
I'm in a restaurant where they're like, okay, today we're going to serve, the entrails of a sheep and served in this vinegar. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Um, but he was an excellent chef. Everything was delicious. And I really began to appreciate, I guess I would call it regional cuisine and regional ingredients. These are something that, is coming to fruition in our own country now, too. How people are proud of the products that they grow in their own region and don't have to be shipped thousands of miles,
Right.
which is kind of some of the work that I do now, advocating sustainability and regenerative agriculture so we can improve our food system.
So you're in France, you're just immersed into the culture, you're immersed into learning to
Yeah.
be a chef by being a
Hmm.
cook.
Yeah.
What's the next chapter for you? Where does life go from there?
So I stayed several years and um, I wasn't homesick. I loved living there, but it became increasingly difficult to find a job. The whole visa thing was getting more and more. Even then, and this is a long time ago, immigration was becoming a question, and I couldn't get a job as easily. So I moved back to New York and started working in New York, and very satisfied, very happy to do that. And I worked in New York for, gosh, I have to calculate, probably the last 35 years.
So you're back in New York and you're working in the food community.
Yeah.
How do we get from there now to be the White House pastry chef?
Yeah.
How did that transition happen?
I think it still happens today, but in those days there was a lot of food magazines, printed magazines. Now
Okay.
it's almost all online. People, which is still just as nicely done, but everybody had Gourmet magazine, Bon Appetit, um, a lot of great magazines, and I happened to have a dessert that was photographed in one of those magazines. And this, I'm guessing, somewhat because I just got a call out of the blue from Lee Berman, who was the social secretary for Mrs. Bush, and she said, "We'd like to interview you for a job here." So I was a little scared, not going to lie. I went ahead and got to meet everybody, and eventually was chosen for the job.
I don't know a lot about the White House or the government in general, but I have to believe when you're making any type of consumable item for the president and any of their staff and family, I have to believe that the scrutiny is intense. They'll scrutinize to make sure not just that you're a great chef,
Yes,
but you're a good person too, right?
absolutely. It's 6 months of a very intrusive investigation into your background.
Obviously to protect the president and that. So that, I think, speaks to the caliber of who you are, to go through that process and to be brought into the White House along with the other cooks and the other chefs there. And that's very prestigious and I think very impressive.
Thank you for that. It wasn't all a white sheet of paper, though.
It's by the way, that's why it's still called at work, even in the White House, right? It's still called work.
Yeah. You have to answer a few questions.
Yeah, a couple, right? And that's when you pray that your family members and friends and others that are doing the background check don't bring up all the bad stuff.
Right. That's
The
right.
silly things you did when you were in your youth, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So you're in the White House and you are the pastry chef for the president and the first lady.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
So it's a quick learning curve, of course. Beyond, I mean, hopefully by that point in your career, you have a pretty good understanding of baking and pastry. And by that, I mean all the different components. For example, you should have worked in a hotel and done banquets, hundreds of people.
Hundreds, a lot of people all at once.
Right? All at once. You should have done work in chocolate, work in what we call petit fours or cookies. You should have done plated desserts in restaurants. You should have done what we call decor, is like pulled sugar or nougatine or chocolate sculptures. All those things play. So, I mean, that's a given. But then something very interesting that I found at the White House is there's an entire crew of people that don't change from administration to administration. They're called the resident staff. And some of them have been there a very long time. It's one of my first days, this gentleman his job role was called the executive steward. So he was in charge of inventory. And he said, well, don't throw those leftovers away because as Mamie Eisenhower told me, you should always save the leftovers. And I thought he was joking. He was not joking. He had been hired by the Eisenhower as a very young man in his early 20s, and he was then in his 70s. So fascinating to see these people who have served our country and who get no credit whatsoever.
Right.
And they don't want it, by the way. They want to remain in the background. I'm the only one. I'm the blabbermouth that goes out here and talks about it. I'm one of the few. But I have great respect for what's known as the resident staff in the White House.
How about the facilities? And once again, there's some of these questions I'm asking, obviously, if they're too sensitive to answer, that's obviously, we respect that. But I'm going to ask him anyway.
Go ahead. Shoot.
So how about just the White House in general? Was there any cool parts of the building that you found more fascinating than others? I mean, the whole building had to be fascinating.
I love it. I love this question. There's so many things I could go into. Let me see. The biggest one is, so as you might imagine, there's a basement. I mean, the main floor is what's called the state floor, and that's where all the pictures take place there. Whenever you see the president speaking or any kind of meeting, it's on the state floor. There's a basement underneath that, which is actually where the original kitchen was. And imagine, the building was built starting in 1790 until
Mhm.
1799. So 1790, and this is where you can still see the chimneys that go up to the roof of the White House. They were all built from that time. These are not the original floors. Actually, the original White House was the interior was completely demolished during the Truman years. In fact, Truman only lived in the White House for about 6 months, while the entire inside was removed and replaced with steel girders. So
Okay.
now it'll last a long time. But
Interesting.
there's one thing that was left that's very curious. There's scorch marks, black soot on a particular doorway. And that soot they know is from the burning of the White House in
Mhm.
1814 during the War of
Right.
1812, when the British
Right.
came and actually did set fire to the entire house. And those scorch marks are still there. Uh,
Interesting.
Quite fascinating. That's one of the key parts. The other part is something that your question leads me to more recent, and it gives me a chance to give a shameless plug for my show on called Masterclass with Jose Andreas.
Okay,
Um,
that's hey, you can do it. And by the way, send me the link to that, and we'll put it when we release this podcast. We'll
yeah,
put that out there.
cool. I'll do that. Anyway, I started researching President Eisenhower, and it turns out he was a great cook and loved to cook in the White House. In fact, he had his own kitchen built on the third floor, and I knew about that room, but I didn't know it was for him. It's now used as a break room for housekeepers, but
Okay.
it's exact like a replica of a 1950s kitchen. It reminded me of my mom's kitchen with the
Okay.
formica everywhere, some stainless, but these cabinets with this sort of like I don't know, shaker decoration on the side, and
Cool.
this like it was so cool. And yeah, the housekeepers use it like to heat up their coffee and stuff. But I
Right.
found out that was Eisenhower's personal kitchen, and he used to cook for his family and even for congressional meetings and some foreign dignitaries.
Interesting. So the audience now, and I in particular, want to know: did you ever make any pastry items for the staff up there? Did you ever use that kitchen?
Oh, I didn't really. It was really their territory, and these are some serious ladies. I mean, they take
Yeah.
care of a big house and a very old house,
Right.
and they have their procedures. And I wouldn't have dreamed of like spilling coffee on that counter
Yeah,
for
or
all of
flour,
them.
right? No
Yeah.
butter or flour up there,
No
right?
way, no way. Anyway, I have my own kitchen, and it's small, but it was fine.
All right, so here's what the audience also wants to know. And once again, if this is something that you can't answer for obvious reasons, it's fine, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah,
So you were there for two presidents. You were there
yeah.
for Bush and Obama.
Hmm.
Um, talk about their pastry habits. We need to know.
Yeah, uh,
Food secrets.
yeah. Their pastry policies, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
policies. We
yeah.
need to know the policies.
I don't know if it qualifies as a policy because they probably didn't put all that much time into it. Uh, Very similar and very different in their own. So the Bush family, um, sometimes the daughters were there. They really love desserts, like all kinds. You could, pretty much, and especially President Bush. I always say I don't think he ever met a dessert he didn't like. Um, he just whatever you made, he was like you just served him manna from heaven, man. He was
He's
like, "This
happy,
is
huh?
so good. Oh, thank you. So grateful for it, And of course, he liked traditional American desserts, as did President Obama. And so yeah, he was much more like had kind of universal tastes. President Obama only liked pies, and I can definitely talk about this because he's on record like many times. Um,
Okay.
and it's quite specific. I find it amusing. He's a very disciplined, very ordered man. I mean, just his schedule, his habits are very organized. So no ice cream, no whipped cream, no none of that, just the pie. And on top of that, I sometimes would notice that some of the filling was pushed away to the side. I would see the plates when they came back, right?
Yeah, right.
But all the crust was gone. So I think you could have just served him the crust and he would have been happy. But
Hey, so you mean to tell me that when I take a piece of cake and I only eat the frosting, that's okay?
you're in good company. You should run for office, maybe.
Yeah, I might run for office one day because of that. My
Yeah,
pastry habits. That's great.
right.
That had to be an honor. Forget politics. Leave the politics out. It had to be an honor to serve the presidents. That had to be very, very cool.
It's amazing. I never took it for granted. I got goosebumps walking in through those gates every day.
I
And
would
there's
too.
something about the building itself. You see, and Washington, D.C. in general, you see, our founding fathers and how brilliant they were and how much thought went into their building of this country.
So what's the next chapter now? What happens, when you leave the White House, you're done there. What happens next?
So, actually, the answer to your question sort of has to do with Toledo because my father still lived there, and he was at Swan Creek
Okay.
home,
All right.
and getting weaker, really. And I wouldn't have said this when he was alive because he would have been very upset if he thought I left the White House in order to spend more time with him. Uh, he would have been pissed. Um, and that was only one of the. That's only one of the of several reasons. For one thing, it's a great job, and I love being there every day. Um,
Right.
it's sort of one of those jobs that's a great privilege, and you feel like really. I don't know. I felt kind of like it wasn't right for me to keep it forever, which is what some people do. And I mean, I spent 8 years there, and I believe in term limits even for pastry chefs.
Right. Right.
It's kind of like and I love my profession, and I feel like there should be a rotating pastry chef, not just somebody who stays there for a long time. That's when I started the pie company. So it actually it's more than pies. It was a catering company. But we always had a big repertoire of pies as a choice. And oddly enough, at that time in New York,
Okay.
Broadway shows started to incorporate food as part of the onstage action. Like they would have a dinner, the characters would be at dinner and they would be served food and actually eat
Mhm.
on stage. Um, and so I became involved in that. So
All right.
we had just expanded and taken a space in the city, and we're offering sit down restaurant service. But we hadn't had a chance to build up any kind of
Okay.
really
Okay.
even reputation or revenue or assets. Yeah, it really it
Okay.
ended. We closed that business. When I say we, it's my husband and I who ran it, Charlie.
What advice do you
Yeah.
have for people in the audience looking back?
Try to make more mistakes. That's how you learn, and I think it's like the only way that you really learn. When things go
Yes.
successfully, it sort of goes in one ear out the other. Um, so yeah, try to make more mistakes. Follow your heart, follow your passion. That's the key to success. I really believe that. Not what other people told you, or you should, you know, um,
Right.
follow this. I mean, I took Latin and French, and God, for God's sakes, that was really stubborn of me. And in many ways, it caused me a lot of problems. I have no trouble admitting it. I mean,
Mhm.
if I had been more practical in my life, probably would
Well
have had
said.
more
Very,
financial
very well
success. That's for
said.
sure.
Great
Anyway,
advice.
follow your heart. I'm a happy person. Uh, do find out who you are not
Mhm.
and learn from that. The other side of that coin is don't bang your head against the wall forever, because just because you chose it once doesn't mean that you have to do it the rest of your life.
So, Bill, as we move to wrap, one of the things that a number of the guests here on the Rocket Networker podcast have brought up is, why don't we do a summit in Toledo, the Rocket Networker Summit, and let's bring in the guests from all over the world, meet these other guests, or
Yeah, me too.
get people to come in Northwest Ohio that are ties there, and let's just have a fun day together doing
Wonderful.
a summit. What do you think of that concept?
Oh, a great idea. I'm in. And let's get some students too, because really, I mean, I think I remember when I was that age, you don't know if you really have the background that you need to succeed. And I got everything I needed from my education in Toledo. And I want to tell the students that they are second to none, that they can compete on a world stage with their education from University of Toledo. It's a
There's
great
so
idea.
many successful Toledoans and University of Toledo graduates around the world that it's time to come back, and not move back per se, but let's come back for a visit and have some fun with the students. I love that idea.
Great idea.
So, Bill, I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for your friendship, and thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Likewise, Rick, and thank you for your service to the university and to the community. This is such an important thing for people to really connect and get to know each other. Right now, it's on Zoom, on digital, but hopefully we'll be seeing each other face to face soon.
I would look forward to that. And that's it for this episode of the Rocket Networker podcast. Now it's time to launch connections to ignite your success. And the key question is, are you ready? Are you ready to launch connections to ignite your team's success? Then let's schedule a keynote speech at your next meeting or conference, or a training workshop, or let's do some coaching. Go to rocketnetworker.com and click on the link. It's time to launch connections to ignite your success. Are you ready?